everyone.
So fun.
I've done so many panels at South by Southwest, and now I realize that if you want to fill a room, all you need to do is say in the description, your best sex life starts today.
Yeah.
So Emily, thank you so much for coming up, Dr. Emily.
JJ.
We are very good friends, just so you know. So this is like...
We have these talks anyway, so we just thought we'd bring it to us.
So here are all my new questions. I want to frame this conversation. We're at a whole life health. We talk about sex, talk about vibrators, we talk about having great sex, but I want to frame this as sex as wellness. Because I think that takes away a lot of the uncomfortable things that we think about sex, but you can still bring back the sexiness.
Yeah.
So, and I know this is what you talk about all the time. So explain to me why I think of sex as not sex, but health.
Okay, so I want to say that sex is wellness. So just think about that for a minute. For so long, so this is my 20th year. I've started the Sex with Emily podcast 20 years ago. And for many, many years, sex was like the bastard child of the wellness industry. They'd be like, oh, we should bring Sex with Emily in and she'll talk about... And now I hope we're all realizing that it impacts our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health, the foods we eat, medications we're on, and also, let me be honest, our mental health, stress, trauma, and shame are the three things that's actually keeping us from having pleasure in our bodies. And so our overall wellness is impacted by our relationship to sex.
I mean, have any of you guys heard of the hard 75 or soft 75? Yeah, so you're supposed to drink like 3 liters of water and exercise and read and all this stuff. And a friend of mine just put me on it. And I'm like, shouldn't sex be with someone or by yourself? And it's a hard topic to bring into that, but it should be.
It should be meaning okay, my dream, are you talking about you can measure it, track it somewhere? Why isn't your sexual health on your Apple Watch? We measure sleep, we measure your steps, we measure other things. Because if sex is wellness, and so I wrote a book 2 years ago called Smart Sex, How to Boost Your Sex IQ and Own Your Pleasure. So what is sex IQ? It's like these 5 pillars of sexual health. And it's like all the things that you want to do anyway, like am I in my body during sex, or am I disassociating and thinking about the laundry or my ex, or those moments when you're not totally present, or your health, the medications you're eating, how do I feel about my confidence? Do I feel good in my body or not? But if you're just measuring it from a step standpoint, have I touched my body this week? Have I had an orgasm? Have I connected to my partner? Was there intimacy? How great if we could track this stuff with low pressure? Because I think a lot of times you're like, oh, we should have sex a certain time a week. And really my whole mission is for everybody, no matter where you are, no matter what stage of life, you get to decide what pleasure means to you and what good sex means to you. And so much of what we've been told about it, though, is it should be these certain things and these certain times. So first it comes to it might just be intimacy. I just want to connect with my partner and get a foot rub or a massage, and that's intimacy. But whatever it is, by able to track it and measure it, how many times a week am I doing things that make me feel good, that I'm prioritizing, that are all about my sexual health?
Let's talk about, you call them the pleasure thieves. I want to talk about what's keeping us from having good sex, and then how we get to the point where we're having good sex.
Okay.
And shame is your first one.
Yeah.
And it's a big one because it covers a lot of things. So explain it to me.
So the pleasure thieves, these are the things: stress, trauma, and shame. I'm going to start with the stress first, just because I'll get to the shame. Stress and anxiety. So anyone ever feel stressed, anxious? 5 seconds ago, I was like, where's my mic? Here's the thing about stress. When we're stressed and we're walking around our daily lives, we have a lot of anxiety, we have a spike in cortisol, among other things happening in our bodies. When we are living in a place of fight or flight, it's really hard to feel arousal at the same time. So make no mistake, if lately your libido, or you get in the bedroom and all day long you've been stressed out and you're like, but why aren't I ready to go for sex? Why aren't I having orgasms? Probably because you're having a little stress and anxiety. So calming your nervous system and doing all the things that we all know that can help our anxiety. And then there's trauma. Trauma, big T, little t trauma. We've all had things in our life that have impacted the way we act today. So recognizing those things of how it impacts our, survival mechanisms, how we relate to people, family stuff, traumas, live in our bodies, impacts how we have sex. And then shame. Shame, I believe, is probably the most intense pleasure thief because it permeates so many areas of our life, and it's also the most subversive. We don't totally recognize it, but let me give you some examples where it starts. So, you might not remember this, but you might have been pre-verbal. Maybe you're a toddler, and you put your hand down your pants for a minute because it's self-soothing. You weren't jacking off. You're like, that feels good when I put my hand in my pants. And maybe a caregiver said, don't do that. That's wrong. Don't put your hand there. And then your little brain thought, oh God, that's dirty. I probably shouldn't touch myself there. That's just one example. Or you grew up in an environment where you were told it wasn't okay to be sexual. You should wait till you're older to, sex is only for procreation. Someone once told you that your labia looked funny or that your penis wasn't what they wanted. That shit lives on for every time we have sex. So I hear from people all the time, they're like, I'm 40, and when I was 20, someone told me that I had a weird labia or I smell funny, and now I can't have sex. So shame comes in at us all these different ways. It's societal shame, personal shame, confidence, and once we can learn to recognize that, we can talk about ways to kind of handle shame because you don't have to live with shame. The first step is recognizing it, but it's a big blocker to having the pleasure that we all deserve.
One of the things I love that you talk about is you normalize everything. It doesn't matter what kind of sex or not sex you're having. Emily has met 200 people that are in the same situation as you. And no matter what age you are, or gender, right? I just listened to Emily do a live podcast, and the host was a male, and he had a lot of the same questions the women had.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that, because 55-year-olds might be thinking, oh, well, the 25-year-olds are having all the great sex.
They're not.
But we're in fucking menopause and shit's happening down there.
Let me tell you something. This is going to be a bold statement. I don't think that anybody is having great sex, to be honest. Most people are not having the sex that they want or they desire. Yes, you were during the honeymoon phase. I know the first 6 months to 2 years of your relationship was amazing, and we're always trying to get back to that spark. But overall, a lot of the information we have about sex is simply just wrong, not accurate, and since it's still shrouded in, I'm currently shadow banned on Instagram for talking about sex, so it's still hard to get accurate information. Dr. Google's not your friend. But when it comes to men too, my heart goes out to men because men are told, the message from society again, and this is where men get the shame, is you should always want sex. You should always be aroused, turned on, have an erection, and know exactly what to do at all times, right? How the hell are you supposed to know that? And then women are I should be orgasming during every sexual situation, but and then we don't communicate about it, so it gets, messy. So I think that wherever we're at, in any stage of life, the best sex of your life could start today. So it's maybe you had never really talked about it in a way that was truly honest about what you desired and what you wanted. So I think taking the pressure off ourselves and saying what kind of sex do I actually like? What feels good to me? Get curious.
And what does sex mean? What does sex mean to you?
Okay, to me?
Yeah.
Well, another one of my missions is to decenter sex on penetration. Do you understand that when I say sex, what do you think of? Penis goes in vagina. Would you say anyone agree that that's probably what you think? Okay. There's a lot of problems with that. First off, we know why, right? Because if you go back to culture or religion, a lot of it, that's how we make a baby. And that's really the only time we should be having sex, depending on how you grew up. The problem with that, number one, is that if you have a vulva, if you're a woman, you have a vagina, only 20% of women are going to orgasm from anything to do with a penis at all. Most of our pleasure and our orgasms are going to come from a finger, mouth, toys, and you could have the best penis in the world. I'm sure you do. Your penis is amazing. But that's really not how the magic happens, but then we're centering it on penetration. So I would love sex to be defined as an intimate connection where there was mutual pleasure for both people involved, and we talked about what we wanted, and we explored different erogenous zones, and we had a good time. And hopefully there were orgasms, but the other way I want to define sex is a lot of times sex, the way we define it, is very goal-oriented and very technique-based. Like we did this position, that position, I came, maybe she came, we rolled over, fell asleep. And it's so linear, and I would love it to be sort of expansive into sex is defined as connection. Sex is defined as intimacy, and it's sort of whatever we want it to be. And that's without being so goal-oriented towards orgasm and position, but more about getting curious about what actually feels good to ourselves, if it's solo sex, huge fan, or in a relationship.
Talk to me about the age thing again, though, too, because I was under the impression when we were sort of coming into our own sexually, AIDS was a big thing, right? And I always think that when you're in your 50s, that really affected the way we thought of, like, this is scary. And also slut-shaming was a thing.
Yeah.
And I was under the impression that for the younger generations, obviously AIDS is a different thing, but the slut-shaming and being focused on the male orgasm all went away. But no?
No. I wish that was the case. I'm open. We can talk about this after. What I'm finding is that that's what we believe. We're like, oh, but they grew up with porn, and there's so much more information out there. But there's not a lot of accurate information out there. A lot of people grew up with porn in their pocket, essentially, like since the last 15, 20 years, porn's been readily available. And so a lot of people have grown up now with porn, and porn without sex education is a disaster. Because then kids are thinking that's how you actually have sex. And we are still not teaching sex education in schools. Only 17 states in America require sex ed to be medically accurate if they teach it at all. It's still really hard for parents, no matter how evolved, how liberal, how open, to actually sit down with their kids.
I made Emily sit down with my kids.
I sit down with everyone's kids.
And by the way, she's amazing because my 16-year-old, I mean, granted, who knows, but he was riveted, and not in a gross way, I think. Riveted by having you have this open conversation with him because you're so good at taking all of the embarrassment out of it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, for so many people, there's still some embarrassment around talk. You talk about people who've been married for 20 years who don't talk about it.
All the time. Yeah, so there's still shame. So yes, I want to talk about that. But real quickly, like I 20-somethings I talk to all the time, nieces, I'm telling you, it's not looking great. Like they might now know about their bodies, but they don't want to ask for it, and men are still not learning. So there's still a lot of work to do around sex, and why I think it's sort of a level playing field. We all get to take this information and think, clean slate. I want to learn my body and figure out what feels good to me, and have a partner that's open to communicate. What was the thing you said after that I was going to go back to just now?
You want to embarrass Connor?
No. But you just said the talking about it, that we don't talk about. Oh, couples. So recently I was speaking somewhere at an event, and I did this exercise. It was a little bit more couples were talking, and I was like, okay, I want you to turn to your partner, and I want you to think about something that you've always wanted, that you've never been able to. It was a practice that if you were in a relationship, you could do it, or it was just someone new. But I was like, think about your sex life. Have there been things that you wanted and you didn't get in the past, or that you haven't been able to say? They had like a half hour to figure these things out. And then throughout the day, couples would come up to me, and this one couple came up to me together, and he was like, he said, thank you, and she was like, thank you. We've been married for 20 years, and we went back to our room after your talk, and he told me he didn't like the way I was giving blowjobs. She's like, we've got 2 kids, we've been together. And she's like, and I knew I wasn't great, but he never told me. And he's like, and we just had the best 3 hours of our life. Like, and that stuff happens. I hear from couples every single day who are like, there's something weird, right? We've had kids, we talk about everything else in our life, but when it comes to sex, we get like, we don't know what to say. We don't want to offend our partner. Like, they're going to feel bad. We feel that maybe we don't really know what we want. Maybe sex will just go away. It'll get better. It doesn't. So this whole skill set around just learning to talk about sex from a place of like compassion and openness is really going to help people get what they truly deserve.
Okay, I want to get to the how-to on that, and you have 5 pillars of having, because it's all well and good to say, and you might feel like you want to talk, but your partner doesn't want to, or to your point, you don't even know the language, or you don't even know yourself.
Yeah. Okay, so, well, the first thing is there's 5 pillars of sexual intelligence. But I'll start with the one that I think speaks to that communication part is collaboration. How well are we actually collaborating with our partners during sex, about sex? Are we talking about our needs and desires? Are we even collaborating? Do we feel comfortable talking about it? So that's the shame part. But the thing is, timing, tone, and turf, if you've been listening to anything I've said, it's like that's the timing. Find the right time when you're not hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. The tone is curious, chill, compassionate. Hey, I realize that we haven't talked a lot about like our sex life. Would you be down to like having conversations about what might feel good to us? I always tell people to blame it on me. And the turf is outside the bedroom when you're like on a road trip or going for a walk, because then you don't have to make the eye contact, but you can still have a really interesting, a good conversation. And it's going to take time. It's not a one-time conversation. I feel like I've been speaking really fast.
No.
And then
you got a lot to get through.
I got a lot to get. I was like so excited. I was like, whoa, I'm breathing now. The first pillar is embodiment. And here's the thing about Sex IQ. The reason why I created these pillars is because I want you to become your own sex expert. I want you to be able to troubleshoot when sex is not feeling the way it should or you want something else. Because I could tell you to buy a toy, use this lube, do this position, which I've been doing for 20 years, and that all works fine. However, we got to troubleshoot. So the first is embodiment. Am I in my body during sex, or am I disassociating, thinking about other things? Presence, mindfulness. The second one is health. Our mental health and our physical health really contribute to our ability to have great sex. So knowing the medications we're on, that's going to impact our desire. The birth control pill. Antidepressants, our nutrition, do we move our bodies, blood flow, we don't exercise a lot, impact our ability to have erections and orgasms. I'm going through them pretty faster, but we could always chat later about it. Self-knowledge. How well do I actually know myself? Like, do I know what turns me on and what I like? Like, if I had to think of the best sex I had or the most recent sex, what were the elements of that moment that felt good? And I have a yes, no, maybe list on my website. It's like a free downloadable guide that you can download, sex acts that might give you some inspo. And then there's self-acceptance. And this is the confidence piece. Do I accept my body as it is today? My experience level. You know, that's a really tough one too. That's where shame comes in. All the pleasure thieves comes into these areas. So really working on like, what can I do to feel just more comfortable and accepting of my body? So those are the pillars we look at. And there have been times where I am a sex expert, I am a sex therapist, and I'm like, I don't want sex right now. Why? And then I'll think, okay, well, I've been working out, but maybe I'm not communicating with my partner enough. So that's kind of how we use them. And I just want to say I launched this really cool community recently, which was like a passion of mine, called Smart SX, and you can find it on my website. But we literally come together and work on these pillars together so we can be like, get our bodies, get like more on board for sex.
What if I was with a friend this morning who hasn't had sex in 10 years. And it's basically not a part of her life. She doesn't think about it. What do you just say to someone like that? No, not married.
Right. Got it. So, not a part of her life because not in a relationship?
I think it's just not in a relationship, just age. It's just, she hasn't done it in a while, and so it's not something she thinks about anymore.
So here's where I would take the pillars.
That's where I get to wellness too, right?
Right. Well, the thing is, when I say sex is wellness, pleasure is wellness. So my whole mission is another one. We have to prioritize our pleasure. So pleasure begets pleasure. The more we look at our life, and I've had to work hard on this too, a lot of us put pleasure on this like we have all these conditions that we don't deserve pleasure unless we do A, B, C, and D. We have to jump through all these hoops. And I'm not even just talking about sexual pleasure. I'm like time with friends, getting a massage, time in nature. We just are in this productivity, hustle, get shit done. But when we have a life that is more open to pleasure and we do more things that make us feel good and less things that make us feel bad, then when we do go to have sex, we're already, like the pleasure receptors are open. It's something that will be, more just readily available to us. Whereas for many, I'm going to get back to your friend in a minute, but for many couples, they're like, why aren't I in the mood, or why do I want it? It's like, because all day long you've been doing all this stuff, and now all of a sudden you should be ready to have sex, get naked, be turned on, when it was like the last thing on your mind. So the pillars help people just understand like what do I need to get to be ready for sex? But to go back to your friend, I would say, like, has she had any trauma? Did something happen? Has she had her hormones checked? Hormones are a huge part of our pillars. Like, literally, if you've been on the birth control pill, you had a baby, or you're menopause, perimenopause, believe me, your hormones have changed over time, and it's readily, we've been talking about this today too. Most women can take a vaginal estrogen and it could change your life, and even testosterone, progesterone, all of these things. So that's just one factor for women that, like, it could be the hormones. It could be if she's had an earlier trauma in her life, that something that just made her feel like sex is just, my body's shut down for it. Maybe she's had some pain. Maybe it's about relational issue. I mean, there's so many different reasons, but I would tell her, and I would tell all of you, if you're in this place, is that solo sex, aka masturbation. I know we've got some great toys here today. We just heard from +1 too. I'm a huge fan. Is that it starts with us, and it is the greatest act of self-love. And people have different feelings about masturbation, like, oh, I'm in a relationship, I don't need that. But it is literally the one thing, the one time where you could give yourself pleasure on your terms, how you want it. And let me remind you that orgasms are actually good for us. We get like a spike in all the feel-good hormones, the dopamine, the serotonin. And if you've been like, I don't actually know what I like or what's going to turn me on at this stage of life, use a vibrator to explore. Like, what? I mean, I've discovered more erogenous zones on my body. Like, I thought I was like a one-trick wonder. Like, I can only have an orgasm one way. But for 20 years, like, research is me search, and from our friend Sarah, and I've just explored, and I'm telling you, what you've experienced so far in your bodies is just the tip of the iceberg. So there are just so many other places to go. So I would tell your friend all of those things, get her hands involved, get some hands-on experience with her own body right now.
Head to your garage. So Emily has a garage that's basically going into the best sex shop you've ever been into. When we first became friends, she was like, I stopped by just to say hi. I was in the neighborhood. I came out with a bag this big, walking past her partner at the time with like vibrators falling out of the bag. And I bring them home, and my husband and I are like, what the fuck do you do with this thing? I don't get it.
I love it. I love you. If you come to my house, like, no one leaves without a lube, a toy, and I'm like the sex toy whisperer. So I was like, tell me how you work it. Come in here. Have you ever had a G-spot? No. Okay, this, that. I love matching. Like, it's like literally my joy.
You have to say I love matching people with their vibrator.
I do. I'm like the sex toy whisperer because I'm not. You might like a suction vibe. You want a nipple clamp, don't you? Another one of my skill sets.
But this is, I think, the beauty of you, that I think if everyone could embody is what do you say? It's cloudy with a chance of...
Yeah, like it should just be like sunny with a chance of orgasms. Like, we pass us all. Like, we should be talking about sex like we talk about the weather. And I that is literally my mission, that we can just get out of the shame. Even parents, I know, you're like, I know, but I can't do it because they're going to be like, Mom, I don't want to hear you talking about sex. And I would say, get over it. I'm going to talk to you about sex. I'm going to talk to you about pleasure. And I'm going to talk about consent. And I'm going to talk about all these other things. Or be that person in your friend group who talks about sex. Because I did not come out of the womb being like, the clitoris has 12,000 nerve endings. Like, I grew up like all of you with no one talking about sex. But over time, it gets easier, and you'll realize that you won't be able to not talk about it when you're with the right partners and surround yourself with the right people, because it's just strange to me and odd that there's literally, maybe money is the other thing, which I actually think we should talk about that more too. Like, our values around money, our shame around money. But with sex, there's still this huge barrier to it that brings up a lot of like, this is wrong or shameful, or if I talk about it, it takes away the magic. So yes, I would love everybody to practice, even today, having a conversation about sex that you maybe wouldn't have normally had, and see where it goes.
And I think the point is, if we're going to spend all this time in the gym and all this time not eating sugar and drinking 3 liters of water, Why shouldn't we be practicing this too?
Why is this still left out of the wellness conversation? Sex is wellness.
All right. Dr. Emily, as always.
JJ.
Thank you.
Love you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sheet Media.